can, first of all, hear us. If you will raise your hand if you can hear us. Can you see that, Tessa?
No.
I'm having a hard time finding that. There we go. I see it. Okay, I'm going to put those hands down. You have to click on the hand. All right. And now if you can see our screen, raise your hand one more time.
Oh, my chat.
All right. Looks like we're good. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. James, and she's going to kick it off for us.
Okay, good morning. First of all, we want to just say what our objectives are this morning. We want to learn about the federal mandates that are driving the change in our data management practices for preschool children in North Carolina. And we also want you to receive information about changes to processes and practices related to PowerSchool and the enrollment process for preschool students. Today, we're just going to focus on enrollment. The next webinar, which will be on September 20th at 11 o'clock, we'll focus on how to establish the Bell schedule for tracking attendance and the reporting of disciplinary actions for preschool children. The Every Student Succeeds Act was signed by President Obama in December of 2015, which reauthorized our Elementary, Secondary, and Education Act. And one of the new reporting requirements that each state must report in their report to the federal government now is on the number and percentage of children enrolled in preschool programs. We acknowledge that your school district may have already established processes for enrolling preschool children in PowerSchool. However, the issue is that many of the districts have established different ways of enrolling children into PowerSchool using different school codes, such that the state cannot collect and report this data in a consistent and reliable way to the federal government. This is one of the reasons for today's webinar on standardizing the process of enrolling preschool children into PowerSchool. We also have had a reauthorization of IDEA, one section of IDEA on the calculation of significant disproportionality. And we, in the past, the special ed programs had to report data to the federal government on the number of children who were identified in different categories and where their settings were, their least restrictive environment, and the third thing was on disciplinary action. A lot of research has been done on disciplinary removals of preschool children, receiving services, and the research is significant enough so that when they reauthorized this particular portion of IDEA, they included a federal reporting requirement that we must now report disciplinary actions on 3 through 5-year-olds who have a disability and have an IEP. As a result of these changes, we out of the Office of Early Learning have gone through a huge stakeholder process of developing a guiding practices document and going around the state last fall doing some major training of over 300 administrators across the state on the guiding practices. And one of the things that we put in the guiding practices is that we have to track attendance and suspension and the enrollment of preschool children in PowerSchool in order for us to begin reporting this data. And we must, in North Carolina, as in all states, begin collecting baseline data this current year in 1920. And we have to collect 3 years of baseline data on disciplinary actions. And then we have to calculate something called a risk ratio. So in order to do that calculation, we also have to look at disciplinary removals and the total number of children from all the different preschool programs in North Carolina. We want to make sure that everyone is very clear about what we're doing here. We will only be reporting data on children who are enrolled in our brick and mortar programs within the public schools until the federal government tells us otherwise. We are not able to track attendance and disciplinary actions for those children with an IEP who may be enrolled in a private child care center or other center that is not within the public schools. And this is you, Justin.
All right, so most of you are already doing the enrollments as you should be in your schools from 300 up. But if you're not, for the students that are in those brick and mortar schools, those preschool students do need to be enrolled. And next week we're going to get into the scheduling assistance, but it looks like they're saying they can't hear. Can you hear me, Vivian?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. All right. So the preschool students should be enrolled, and you're going to enroll those just as you would any other student. Put in as much information as you can on the student in those schools that they're housed in or where the funding is coming to. So this is not a new thing. It's just something that not all schools have been, or not all districts have been doing in the past. All right. Enrollment in the non-public school environments. These school numbers off to the left there, the exceptional children, these program schools have already been set up. For students receiving services, you'll put those in those school numbers. And then the next slide.
The next. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let me touch on what I've sent out.
Okay, good.
So all of these, and I did this last night for the Power School folks. We've been talking about this for a while and how we're going to require you to enroll these students, and we didn't know at the time how we were going to identify these program types. But I pushed these out last night so that it wouldn't be out there for a long time and you not knowing what it was all about. So as of this morning, all public school units have 6 new program types under special programs. And so Vivian's going to touch on these, and then I'll show you how we're going to attach it to the student.
So across the state, we have about 2,100 preschool classrooms, and they have different funding sources with different reporting requirements and regulations. The NC Pre-K is the state pre-K program that once upon a time was called More at 4. But that is state-funded preschool for children who are at risk. The preschool children who are funded by Title I are also considered at risk, but that's federal money for federal Title I schools or different systems that have chosen to use their Title I dollars to serve preschool children. We have over $52 million of Title I money going into preschool in North Carolina, so it's a significant amount. And there are 13 different school systems in this state that are actually the grantee for Head Start. So they administer the Head Start program. And then we have other Head Start programs who actually have classes housed within public school settings. And so if you have a child who is funded by Head Start, that's enrolled in a brick and mortar elementary school or school of any kind in the public schools, then we would identify them as coming from the Head Start program. Preschool exceptional children may also, preschool exceptional children can be a child who is funded by NC Pre-K but also has been identified as having an IEP. The same thing is that a Title I child may also be identified as needing an IEP, and so could a child funded by Head Start or by local government dollars. We do have different programs around this state that are now have local dollars that are funding preschool programs and that are housed within the public schools. And then fee for service, these are children whose parents are paying tuition to the public schools for their child to attend a preschool classroom. That model has really increased over the last several years. So you may have a child that actually is being served by NC Pre-K and the Exceptional Children's Program, and then even in some cases, that same child might be getting NC Pre-K dollars and Title I dollars as well. And the reason is that the funding from any of these programs is not sufficient to pay for the entire program. So this is why we have provided you with a planning guide to work with your different preschool coordinators so that you will know and you will establish a communication protocol within your own school system between you and your preschool coordinators, be they Title I, NC Pre-K, Head Start, or local government programs, so that you will know how to code these.
Okay, let's take some questions here if you don't care. Let's jump back a slide.
Good, okay.
I'm going to start at the bottom. Let's see. Our pre-K students are physically in a separate PK specific school and not an existing elementary school. However, our PK school does not have a number. We have been housing them in the 000 school, which is the district office, I believe. Will this change, and will we get a new school number? So the new school number, that's something that we're continuing to work on, and hopefully we can have something in place prior to next year. But for now, Vivian, right, they're going to leave them in the 000 school, but just use these special programs to identify the student.
If that's the guidance, then we need to write that down and give it out to them so that we at the state will be able to pull all 000 schools at the same time. And I'm not sure that that's a consistent process across the districts. So we do have preschool centers in public schools who were like old elementary schools that they closed and then converted. Some of those have been given a school number because they qualified for a school number because they actually had a formal principal on site and they met all the qualifications to receive a school number. I'm not sure how many we have though that still have 000. So Justin, I'm going to have to defer to your team to make that call.
Well, I know it's not always 000. There's different numbers. I mean, we've got retired schools out there that are being utilized to preschool enrollment.
But as of right now, we've been 000.
Yeah, I would say right now, since we don't have an answer as to what we're going to use moving forward, we just keep doing what we're doing, and we use this special program, and we'll just have to pull all numbers when we pull our reports for these special programs. We'll just pull from all school numbers. Hang on, we got a lot of questions. That should have answered quite a few of them. Yep, same thing. We've got a preschool center that's part of a school district with kids in seats. School number is 289. How do we capture these children? You're going to do that by using these special programs. Vivian, do you want to talk about split funding? Or we've got a couple questions.
We have a couple of questions. And okay, so yes, there is split funding that's going on here because the funding, just an example, a school district who is receiving money for children from NC Pre-K may only be receiving like $450 a month for that child. That's not enough to pay for the teacher and everything else. So they may also be utilizing another source of funding that you see here to supplement that to pay for the entire program. So that's why we want you to identify all of the different sources that might be used at this time. And that's where you're going to get that information from your preschool coordinators. That's what we want you to work as a team together to say when we enroll a child, and I'm sure that each of you will develop your own local protocols, just be able to identify what funding sources would be supporting that child. Does that answer that, Justin?
I think so.
Okay.
There's several on that. What about students who are in NC Pre-K or Head Start but are also EC?
You would identify all three of those then.
Yep. Okay, here's a question I can probably answer. Do we enter start and end dates for each school year for these special programs? So the program has to be re-entered each year. The answer to that is yes. And then if the student leaves, you'll have to provide an end date for the special program.
And that, as you would if you had a second language or migrant, right?
Right.
Right.
If private grant funded, what program assignment would be correct?
Private grant funded probably would fall under local government.
You got that? Okay. Yep. Another question, what about pre-K centers? What number will we use? For now, you'll just use what you've used in the past. And we've got some more meetings set up to try to figure out what range of numbers we can use in Power School.
Okay.
Since ECATS is the authoritative source for EC data, why wouldn't that data report from there instead of having a second special program for EC?
Well, I can answer that because ECATS is Power School is the authoritative data source from which ECATS draws on. But you're right, it is the authoritative data source for the EC specific information. And I do not think that in fact, I'm almost positive this is right, but that data from ECATS does not flow back to Power School. Correct, Justin?
No. Demographic.
We're talking here.
All the demographic data for all students goes to ECAS, and then
The EC stuff comes back over. We have preschool students housed at our high school or middle school, but they are enrolled under the CCAS school. Is that okay? Yes.
Well, I'm understanding at our directions are that we need to use, if that's a brick and mortar school, no matter what, then we use the brick and mortar school number, correct?
I thought we were going off of where the funding was going.
No. Ask the question again. Maybe I misunderstood.
If we have preschool students housed at our high school or middle school, like on that campus, but they're enrolled under CCAS, is that okay?
But that's a public school location. It's not a community-based child care program or a home program. So if it's a public school, brick and mortar school, then we should be using that number. Correct? Because we do have preschool classes housed within high schools and middle schools within North Carolina. And it's just because it's a space issue.
How does that work?
I'm sorry, what?
We were just wondering where the money goes because I thought, based on previous conversations, we were this year putting them in the school where the money's going. So we may have to bring that one back.
Mm-hmm.
Because the problem there, Vivian, is the high schools are not set up in Eddy with that pre-K grade level.
Okay, I didn't understand that, Justin. I was just taking this as literal from what I had understood.
Let's circle back to that one.
Okay,
But there is no grade level.
good question.
What if they're in elementary school? Then yes, you would just continue. You should already be scheduling those students in the elementary schools. Will pre-K students continue to not report ADA or ADM on PMRs?
Correct. We have had no legislative change on preschool students being able to access ADM funds.
Hang on, there's a lot of questions. New to our elementary school this year, Head Start is now housed in our elementary school. So am I understanding correctly that I will need to add both the Head Start, NCPK, and Head Start preschool classes to my elementary power school?
Yes, and that's an interesting question, because last fall I found out that one of our counties houses multiple Head Start classrooms, and they had never enrolled those children into power school until last year. And it's a safety issue as well. If something happened at that school and they didn't have record of those children, they would have issues. So it's not all, yes, they should be enrolled in power school.
Okay, do EC students need to have an active IEP before entering that program? So referrals are not put in this program until the IEP is active.
Okay, I can say this, that we're going to have to issue further guidance to you on this, because there is a sister IDEA program that serves children birth through 2. And there is a legal process from which the IDEA birth through 2 program sends over notifications of children who are potentially eligible for Part B services. We do have to put those children into power school, even though, because we're tracking the compliance, our own compliance of whether or not we serve those children by their 3rd birthday. And we're tracking compliance in ECATS with that. So yes, there are particular instances in which we would be enrolling children who were in the Part C infant toddler IDEA program into power school.
A lot of the same questions. Okay, so students could have more than one special program. Yeah, that's correct, Tammy. Not understanding this question. I might need more details. So do we key them in power school based on program type, or can they stay in one pre-K class? That part we're going to hit on next week when we talk about how to enroll, or not enroll, but how to schedule the students. But the students are going to be put in the programs at the student level. But then they could all be in the same class once we talk about scheduling. We'll go over that more. All right, we are a standalone school, but students are listed in Power School under which elementary school they are domiciled for 2-4 kindergarten. Is that okay? Sounds like no.
No, because they're not enrolled in that school yet. And they're actually in see, I understand that this is how people have been doing workarounds, because we don't have these answers for them. So again, that goes back to the state has got to figure out the answer. What about pre-K centers in public schools that do not have an active school number? How do we do consistent coding of those schools so that we can pull this report?
Okay, good question. Do students who are in the program schools like 292 also need to have a special program entered as well, or is the special program code only for the 300 plus schools?
Yes, that is correct. CCAS children enrolled in the CCAS school, no, excuse me, in the 292 special ed school are those children who are not enrolled in a brick and mortar public school program in which a principal is the authoritative regulatory agent of that school. If a child is enrolled in private child care or it resides in the home and therapy is provided in the home, or any other location outside of the public school brick and mortar schools, then they would go into CCAS, and we would not have to identify, at least at this point in time, we're not identifying this. And the reason is the purpose of what we're trying to pull for reporting of children enrolled in public schools, which funding sources, and the disciplinary actions and removals of those children.
Okay. Would we be attaching the special program to the individual student or to the sections or to both? That's a good question, and I think you could really do that either way.
I don't understand the question.
Well, so in PowerSchool, you can assign a whole section to a special program. That way, every time a kid goes into that section, they're automatically placed in the program. Or you can go to each individual student. And we're not going to require, we're going to have to schedule students based on the time that they're there, and we're going to get into that next week, but I could see where you would want to create individual pre-K homeroom sections for each of these 6 categories. So you could really do either one. When we are enrolling, we're not sure if there's going to be a funding source for EC or not. Does the funding source have to be identified initially?
When we are enrolling, we're not sure. When you're enrolling, which kind of children? Children who are in the referral process, is that the question?
That's what it sounds like. Amy, if you can give us more detail. We'll come back to that. Okay, we allow Head Start to use classrooms in our schools. We do not administer the program, and the teachers are not our employees. Do we need to enroll these students?
Yes, you do, because the principal is the regulatory authority of that school. And we talked with Head Start programs around the state about this, that we need to be tracking, because we have principals who are sending some of these kids home for disciplinary reasons. So yes, we do need to enroll those children. Number one. Number two, for reporting purposes. Number two, for safety purposes. If there was some catastrophic event that happened in that school and the principal had no record of which those children were, then we would have a legal issue going on there.
Okay, will DPI enter the special program categories, or will we have to? I did that last night, so everybody should already have in your special program list these 6 categories.
Do you want to show the next slide? I think that's what shows that next slide right there.
Yeah. So under enrollment, that first screenshot to the left is, if I had a student pulled up, I would go over there under enrollment and click on special programs. And once you do that, near the top of the page, you're going to have a program drop down. And you can see there at the bottom of the drop down, all of the NC, all of the programs that start with NC are ones that we push out. And so those 6 special programs for PK were pushed down last night at midnight. So you would select those, and then, since we're on this screen, you would put in a start date, end date, grade level, submit, and then if they're in multiple, you would just go back through the same process. So you have to do it for each category that they fall under.
And you would know which categories they are by the communication planning templates that you develop at the local level between the different coordinators and yourself. So, and I'm sure that as this process moves forward, we'll gather some examples of how different people have been doing that.
Is Smart Start considered local government funding?
Yes, I think that that could fall under local government funding. It's typically Smart Start has some state, it has a mixture of dollars in it, but I think if we consistently put Smart Start under local government, that will be safe with that.
Let's see. Okay, this is a long one. How does a student's domicile play into the coding for that student? Example, a student lives in one district but attends a NC pre-K in another school outside of that district, which is an NC pre-K program in a Title I school who also has an IEP.
I don't think the domicile would make any difference, although I'm kind of thrown off by that, but I'm sure it does happen. You're still identifying the program types. I don't think that changes. I don't think the residence location, the domicile, would change program types. You would still go with whatever program types you had.
And there's a lot of questions going back to the middle and high school campuses. I'm going to have to get something.
We're going to have to get clarification on that because I didn't realize that these preschool settings or program types would not go into a high school or middle school power school screen.
Well, the programs are there for everyone, but the problem is the grade level's not set up in power school. Like the high school campus is 9, 12. You wouldn't have a 0, 1 and then a 9, 10, 11, 12. So we'll have to get back with everybody on that.
Okay.
Some children could be in school, but children aren't assigned in power school because they aren't taking attendance.
All right. So one of the reasons that we're going to have to establish the bell schedules, it's very critical actually, because though that data is drawn down into ECATS, and people are not putting the bell schedules in there right now. So what's being pulled into ECATS looks like every child with an IEP that's in a preschool setting goes to school for a full day, 5 days a week, when in fact that is not the case. There are many different options of attendance with children with IEPs. The NC pre-K program requires children to go 5 days a week, 6.5 hours a day. So that is a typical one. Title I typically follows that same bell schedule as well. However, in some Title I programs, they may have a variance. They may go 4 days a week and be off to do home visiting on the 5th day. It depends upon the program. So that's why we're going to have to establish this bell schedule. And then to be able to track attendance, that's a new piece that we're going to have to start building this year so that we can collect that data on absenteeism for these children.
All right, so Mark shares what he currently does in his district for those that are attending middle and high campus. In our district, we enroll in the home elementary school and then cross-enroll to the course at the high school. And that keeps him from having to add the pre-K to Eddie for the high school. Yeah, so that might work for everybody.
All right, that's going to be y'all's call on that one. But we also have to know that some of these children in the high school might actually be attached to a CTE course. I'm not sure, but I'm wondering about that because I know certain counties have a lot of CTE, early childhood classrooms in their high schools. So I'm wondering about that particular question, if it's related to one of those children.
We'll take that one back too and have more information next week.
Okay, because if that's the case, then we probably need to add a program type for CTE. I'm not as familiar with that, but I can bring in the state consultants from CTE to talk about that.
Are we supposed to enroll preschool students that are in private programs in some sort of holding school?
If the child is enrolled in a private program of some sort, a child care program or a preschool program embedded in a private school that meets the definition of an elementary school, those children in most cases would be children that have an IEP. If they're not in a brick and mortar school within the public schools, then they would be in the CCAS school. I'm not following if it would be a different scenario for this particular question.
Hang on, I'm still filtering through.
Okay.
Back to the top.
A lot of them are the same. Okay. We're a school system that is actually, this may be the same, that has actually become a new grantee for Head Start. We only have one classroom that is actually inside an elementary school. However, we want to know if we need to enroll them in the Power School school.
If they're in a brick and mortar elementary where the principal is the regulatory authority for that building, then yes, we need to use the elementary school's code for which that child resided in. If the LEA is the grantee for Head Start, if they've leased a space outside of the public school brick and mortar schools, they would have to have remember, we've got two things here. We're trying to just limit what we're reporting to the federal government with regards to the children who are enrolled in brick and mortar schools within the public schools. That's in terms of disciplinary actions and as well as the number and percentage of children. So at this time, I would say just report on the children who are enrolled in a class that's in the elementary school. And then we'll take that particular scenario back and think about that a little bit harder. The question that I would ask that program is, who's the regulatory agent for the classroom? Is it a public school official or is it someone else? So you're going to have to help us problem solve these unique scenarios.
So all of these people who are not employed by our school system will have to have a UID to take attendance in Power School. That's correct, isn't it?
So that would be the Head Start teachers who are working within the public schools, or they're within the school facilities themselves. So they would have to go into the rapid identity system, right?
Correct.
To get that. And I believe there is a way to do that. I'm not an expert on this yet, but I think that there is a way for public school folks to enroll people. in that particular situation, because we do have contractors that are out there that we're enrolling and putting them into the rapid identity system. So I would ask you go back to your HR system, who's in charge of that, and discuss this issue and topic with them.
Okay. All right, why don't you go on and we'll try to catch up on these questions.
Okay. So what we want to just remind you is that coming soon, we have the next webinar, and we're really going to focus on that one about attendance, because attendance really does matter, and the State Board of Education has established a definition for chronic absenteeism. And so we are going to do a follow-up webinar on this. We do acknowledge that pre-K students do not always attend class every day for the same length of time as our school-age children. So in order to even begin tracking attendance, we have to get the bell schedules correct. Because if we tried to track attendance and did not do that piece, then we would be saying that certain children were absent when in fact they were not. So the guidance we've given you in the past about the average daily membership does remain the same. Remember, preschool children are not included in the average daily membership calculations. And truthfully, y'all, if they were, then we would be having universal preschool. So just remember, we don't have universal preschool in North Carolina, so therefore they're not included in the average daily membership calculations. And then we know that students admitted and registered in Power School as MST1 in grade level PK are reported on the principal's monthly report in a manner that excludes them from any calculations and totals. So students in grades level P0, P1, P2, P3 must also be in that MST1 category and will not be included in the average daily membership. The totals for P0 to P3 will be grouped under the PK totals on the PMR. So what we want to have, we knew that we would have a lot of questions today about just the enrollment process, so we wanted to break this up into two segments. So we have developed this planning guide. It did go out with a, Justin, what did you call it? A newsletter that you sent?
Yeah, and we'll get it posted to the web also and share the link.
Okay, and so this is just a suggested beginning point where you're identifying who your different program contacts are, and then you need to sit down together and talk about the information that you're going to need to be inputting. Today, we've only talked about the enrollment process, but we'll talk about discipline reporting and attendance on next week from tomorrow on the 20th at 11 o'clock. We'll focus in on just on that particular piece. But it's really important that you establish a communication process so that we can make this clear and get more reliable data in the future. And that's all I have for today, Justin. Do we have additional questions?
There's tons, but I think a lot of them are alike.
Well, we could review them as a team before next Friday, and if we have not covered any, and I know that I don't know if we'll have the answers about the pre-K centers that are public school centers, but they don't have a school number. Perhaps we can huddle back with leadership at DPI to try to figure out what our consistent answer would be around that. Also about the high school children. How would we assign the grade to children who are enrolled in a high school program? I see those two, or I've captured those two as things that are still unsure of right now.
All right, hold on. we put students in as new enrollments? Yes, you're going to enroll them just like you would a new student. The next webinar is next Friday. We'll send that link out again, and I've got everybody's email address, so I'll share this presentation once we. I think we have one change to make.
We do, and the link to the next webinar is on one of the slides.
Okay, good. A lot of scheduling questions. Suzanne, I got your question. That is something we're going to address next week. Scheduling.
If you have more questions about enrollment that we don't answer today, you can hold those questions until next week perhaps as well. Are you still reviewing?
Yeah. This one's one I don't have an answer for, but do we mark these students as standard members or visiting students?
I don't know.
I would just go ahead and put them in as standard members because they're not reported there. Yeah, MST1. Yeah. Vivian, let's take this list and put together an FAQ and follow up.
Okay. I want to thank everybody for your willingness to come online, and I really appreciate the early childhood community stepping in here with you. They need to help, and this has got to be a team effort if we're going to be successful at this. So thank you all so very much. We will speak with you on September 20th at 11 o'clock, and we hope to get a frequently asked questions document to you. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.